Let's have a look at retraction speed. Retraction speed is the preventive mechanism that the 3D printer has to pull the filament back to alleviate the pressure of the nozzle when printing the filament out. So imagine that you're pushing down the filament, and that creates quite a lot of pressure. When we stop printing, the pressure is still there. So if we don't have retraction, what's going to happen is that even though we stop printing, the filament is going to be pushed a little bit out to decrease the pressure when we say that we are, for example, traveling from one point to another, and we are not printing. So that is the main reason why we have these oozing, we have a lot of oozing and we have these strings, because the pressure inside of the hot end is too high. And since the pressure is too big, even though we say at that moment, don't print, we still have like this residual filament that's being pushed out even though we don't want to. So what the retraction does is that it pulls the filament up, so we are not printing when we don't want to. In theory, it would be the best setting to be printing with TPUs. But as I've told you before, TPUs and flexible filament are stretchy. So what it means is that if you pull the filament up too high, then you create pressure between the filament that's being pushed up and the filament that's being pushed down. And then sometimes it can create tangles inside of our extruder, and then we need to deassemble our extruder. And as I've told you, it's not the most pleasant experience. Some printers are easier to deassemble than others, but still, if we can prevent that, then it's definitely better to prevent it. So retraction speed determines how quickly we are going to pull the filament up. In theory, as I've said, it's a very nice feature to have, specifically with flexible filaments that are more prone to create a lot of pressure. So they are more prone to really go printing even though we don't want to, because they are stretchy. And as I've told you, the more quicker you go, the better, because then you break the filament and then you don't have the oozing. If you go slowly, then you stretch the filament and the filament creates these hairs and we don't have a very clean print. So in theory, the retraction would be the best. But as I've told you, there are colliding forces of the filament that's being pulled and the filament that's being pushed down. So what we need to do is to test how retraction speed works with our 3D printers. You'll hear a lot of suggestions to disable the retraction at all. And again, I don't want you to disable retraction because it was created to help us. So if we can use it with our 3D printers, then we should be using it. And it's saving us a lot of time to keep cleaning our prints afterwards. So what we want to do is to find if our 3D printer can be using retraction, what is the ideal speed and what is the ideal retraction length. Retraction length and retraction distance are the same property. Different slicers name it differently, but it's the same thing. And retraction length suggests how much should we jump back, how much should we pull back our filament. And producers of our filaments will definitely specify to us what is the best retraction length. If you're starting and you don't know, then I would suggest you to start with slower retraction speed and smaller retraction length, and then try to experience and increment little by little. What I would like you to do now for your research is to go and test two things. First of them is to try to print without your retraction speed and length completely disabled. The second test is to print with the retraction speed and length enabled with values that are suggested to us by the vendor. We are going to test these swatches and we are going to check for two things. The first thing is how easy it was for us to print, and the second thing is the quality of the 3D printed textile as a result. Go ahead, do your tests and check if your retraction speed affects the quality of your print or if it doesn't.